I am sure that you're eager to learn what we are going to talk about today. I mean, talking about Flexbox and CSS Grid, well, you can go deeper than that. But before we do so, I want to walk over the structure of the files that we got ahead of us or in front of us, depending on if you have downloaded it or not. So let's look here. I have to the right, I have a live server. As you know, I can serve this one to the browser so I can see what happens here when I change something over here. Like if I remove the T over here and then I save, you will see that the T is also removed here, up here on the top. So there's serving correctly over here. So that's what I want you to do, basically. And you should by now know how to do that. I also intend to walk over the files, as I said. What we have here is that basically we got the index.html file. We got the styles with base.css, and we got student.css. What we got inside of those will come to shortly, but let's skim the surface first. And then we got a folder called fonts, and in here we have two kind of fonts, which cannot be seen inside the Visual Studio Code, but these are WOFF2 fonts. It's a file format for fonts that's commonly used. Most of the times you use that, but there are many others as well for other computers, operating systems and such. So let's look into what we got here on inside the base, and then also how the base is connected. So you can see here in the index file, we start by declaring this to be an HTML document. We say that it's the HTML document starts here, and the language we're going to use is going to be that of English. And if there's a version of English, it could be American English, it could be Great Britain as of now. So I'm using Great Britain. And then we have here the head part. Head part is basically telling us some kind of meta information about this. So we start by saying we're going to use the short set of UTF-8, which is like common worldwide. And then we have that's going to be backwards compatible and work together with Edge. Internet Explorer equals Edge. And then we got the name viewport content, which makes this our ability to work with responsive web design to different screens easier to use. Or in some cases, even you can't go ahead and do any of it without this. So these are basic meta tags for doing those things. And then we got the title. Title is what you see up here on the top, layout techniques. And then we got the link, rel style sheet. This is nothing we can see here on the screen. As with these, so that we can see them on the screen, this is basically a link to this file. And the same goes for this one. It's a link to that file. Okay. Could go over there quite quickly, but just by holding Control on PC and Command on Mac and just click on it, and it'll come there as well. So now we got a view of what we have in the head. In the body, we got more things. We got like body, of course, which is what we see here. It starts with up here, and then go down all the way down here. And now we have in that body, in this case, in this thing, we just have one single element nested inside the body, and the rest is nested inside of that element instead. This is not very common. I mean, I don't have too much content to show here, and so that is why this is what's going on. I mean, we have the main tag, which is also, as with body, you're only allowed to use the main element once in a website or web page. website, you can use the main thing once on each web page. It's a different thing for what's called a website. A website could be many web pages, of course. Now we have the H1, which is the heading over here, layout techniques. You can see that over here. And now we have first section, which is the Flexbox section. And this is where it gets interesting because it's actually the structure of this one and the other one is kind of the same. So what's going on here is that in each of these sections, we got one section here and one over here and one that is hidden at the very bottom. We'll come to that later on. We can see that they are all sections. They have a heading. In this case, it's called Flexbox, this one. And then they have a box underneath which contains a lot of other boxes and text inside of them. So that's the structure, and you can actually go down and look at the other one, which is basically the same. The only difference being that this is the headline of CSS Grid, and this is called CSS Grid in class and ID. The rest is the same between those two sections. Now, the final section is what's really where we'll start to combine very, very many techniques, and things are going to be a bit more complicated, but it's manageable if you take your time and repeat and you go back and you look at it. So it's going to be an example over here. So we're going to look at all of this and make and try to understand why this became this. I don't know. This is kind of weird. I think for some reason this class link had jumped in just between there, but I'll do that. So that's going to fix itself at that very point. We'll get there. We'll have that fixed. And I don't know if you need to fix this. I'm going to address this and make it work on the file you downloaded, so it's not going to be an issue. Let's get ahead then. This is the HTML. The next thing is going to look into the base.css. And what we got set up here is that we are saying that first thing we'll call is the reset, and then we'll call the base. Okay, that's the structure for the layer. So we'll start by calling everything inside the layer called reset. And then we'll call everything inside the layer called base. So let's get and do that. So what's the reset? What's going to be called inside of here? Well, I haven't written a word of this. So everything inside of this is kind of common practice. There are a couple of different ways you could do resets, but all resets had one purpose, and it's actually to kind of make browsers more similar to one another. So if you're using Mozilla Firefox or Opera or Chrome or Edge, you want them to be the baseline for how they design things to be as similar as can be. So you start by resetting all the different aspects of each browsers and how they treat CSS and how they treat their HTML with the formatting and such. And you're telling them, well, let's at least try to start on the same page. So you reset all the browsers formatting, not all the way, but you take care of most of the things by doing this. And I didn't do it. I didn't do this. I copied this code, and it's common practice to do so. So if you ever do need to reset the browser, you can please go ahead and copy my code. It is sometimes it takes time to just read through and get on with what does this mean and why did they even use the where function over here, where selector over here. Well, I can't step through all of this. Like I can say, like for this one, for example, you could say colon where, and then you select all the elements inside of this. Now, you might have read or heard that there's something called specificity. Specificity is basically, if I hover over here, you also can see that I get a selector specificity of 0, 0, 1. that means basically that I got a value that's quite low, and it's easy for me to write something later on in the document that overwrites this. So let's say I have OL here that says padding 0. Let's say you see here you have an OL again. See this one? Say I didn't have an OL. I had a class for this one instead, which is called just to be fun, Olle. This is a class I use. Well, in this case, that class would say 0, 1, 0. So you see, it doesn't really say 10. So you don't want to read this as 10, but it says 0, 1, 0, and it has a 1 in the middle section instead of all the way to the right, which indicates it's a higher value. You could also have some kind of combination going on, like saying I got the OL, but that should be inside of a div, directly inside of a div. Now we got the div and OL, and combine 1 plus 1 equals 2. So we got 0, 0, 2. Now, why do I say this? Because this one has a higher specificity than this one. I've been direct in saying only the OLs inside of the div. So I've been more specific. That is what specificity means. So whenever I have a high specificity, if I instead go ahead and write padding and I say 1 rem over here, what's going to happen is that this is going to be overwritten. And then you go ahead, you who know about specificity and everything like that, and you've watched the content on that, you'll say that, well, I would have written over it anyway because this is presented later on in the document. And that's also true. There's also called source order, which says that whenever something is written later on in the document, it will overwrite the earlier part. But that's not 100% true. It is only true if the specificity of this one isn't lower. The specificity always wins. Plus, for example, if I go ahead and do this and place it up here, what's going to happen is that this is going to have still the same specificity of 001, and this is going to have the specificity of 002. It is presented early on in the document, but since it has a higher specificity, this thing will not change any OL elements. It will have no effect because this has a high specificity. So source order is one thing, but specificity trumps source order. Now, in this case, I think the most suitable thing to do is actually just to put them together, because actually I don't want them to have them two sides. I'm going to put them there. This is a good practice. If you ever are going to have two elements that are going to be treated with the same kind of rules, well, you just put them in the same line. You put them together like this. Don't repeat it a couple of times over. Make it manageable. So this is the reset, and now I think you'll understand. You've talked about specificity and source order, and I think that's a bit clearer. I believe that it has, like any other knowledge, has some depth to it. I mean, like how we're going to apply this, how we're going to think about this when we're working with our design, and those things are far from easy to grab. So spend time with these kind of thoughts and go back to them in the future, and you'll see that they are going to be easier to manage. Now you can see here, and we have some situation where I have star before, after, padding 0, so on, inside of the base. So what is the base then? Well, if the reset resets the browsers to a point where they are handling things equally, as equal as possible at least. And then the base sets the next step of the guideline to say that, well, now when we reset everything, we want to handle most of the things this way. So we kind of setting a default value for how things are supposed to work, like saying which kind of fonts we're going to use, which kind of um, font sizes, and so on and so forth. So we are, which instead of repeating things that are so default and so very generic in its very nature, every time we write something, we try to write it once here. So things that we don't want to repeat a couple of times because it's always true, almost always true. We put it here in base. So that's what we do. But you'll see here, we got a new thing going on here, and I'm going to change it in your file. But it's also important that we find these kind of things. You can see here I have a before and after box size and border box. That's what's going on up here. Fine. But why would I do that again over here? I don't need to. If the only thing I want to add is to say that padding is 0 and margin is 0 on every element and every pseudo element, then this is what I'm going to do. Because it's already been done regarding box sizing up here. I'm going to save that. So let's look over the base. The base basically contains, no pun intended, sorry. Basically contains a couple of variables here. These are not very important to understand right now, but the thing is, this one kind of is important because what it does, it tells the browser that the font size is 62.5%. And what is that? Why do I, of what? 62.5% of what? You say that, and I say, yeah, I understand the question. It's a valid question, and that is what I'm going to say next. So, the default font size on web pages is 16 pixels. So that is the default font size from most web browsers, or the most common ones. So what I'm doing here, as I say, is 62.5%, is that I'm taking 62.5% of 16 pixels. And what is that? That's 10 pixels. So I'm saying that the font size is going to be 10 pixels by doing this. Why did I not just write 10 pixels? It would have been so much easier. Now, I know it would, but it also would have locked a couple of things up. If I use a percentage is a relative value. It's a value based on what's written in the website. So if the browser says 16 pixels is the default, well, we'll get 10 pixels. But say someone with a visual impairment or such is visiting my website and needs bigger text, maybe they have changed the default settings on their own browsers, saying that their font size should be 20 pixels. Now, if I have this on 62.5%, it will respect that person's wishes. It will calculate everything that I have based on that basis on font size. It will still do so by taking 62.5% of that person's 20 pixels instead of 16 pixels. So by doing this, I also am being dynamic in the way I handle my designs towards people who want things to be larger on their screens. So that is the reason why I put it on the base. And then we have RGB, where's basically the RGB values 0010. Right now, I don't even know if I use them. Maybe I do. Yeah, I do. So I can change RGB values here, and that's going to affect things over here. Yeah, we'll come to that shortly. Font face. Well, this is a common way of introducing fonts. You know, I spoke to you earlier about we having fonts over here in the fonts folder. And this is the way we get them to work together with our code. We use an at font face, and we call these things. These things kind of have to be correct. So you have to have the font family pop-ins. You have to have this font style normal. Why do I say normal? Because I haven't changed it. I haven't told it to be bold or something like that, or italic. But then the font weight, that one is different. There's a numeric value. So 400 stands for regular. So that's basically a regular font size. And you see that I have that file here, regular. And then I have Latin 800. This is kind of a bold font size. So I haven't boldened a font. I have a font that is bold. There's a difference there, because I could easily make anything bold, but I still don't have a bold font size. I've just added thickness to the existing one. But what this one is actually the file itself contains characters that have already been boldened. Okay? That is the difference here. And that is what we got here in font face. We call on those two, so we can have bolder and we can have regular ones. Then what we do over here is kind of advanced. It is not something you need to know now. You'll get to that in the future. But I can say that this one is called a universal selector. So what it does is basically it tells me I'm selecting everything, every element. And what this one does, it says select every pseudo element that exists before every element and then after element. And what these two are, pseudo elements, you'll need to learn it. You'll need to read up on it. For right now, it is not very important. And then I'm setting all of these to have no padding, no margin. So in case any browsers have added extra margin to their body tag, it's going to be fixed. If extra margin to the A elements, it's going to be 0. So everything's going to be 0. And then we go to body. And we can see here, it's kind of, yeah, that's what we do here. Well, okay, on the C, I see. Yeah. So they have this section. You see that? RGB color, background color. So that is R is 0. G is 0, you know that. B is 10. We wrote all of this up here. And then A, which is alpha, stands for alpha. It's alpha channel. Well, you could, if we switch it around, we could talk about opacity, or transparency. Just to make things easier for you to understand, it's basically saying that instead of it showing in its full, color, where like this is going to become almost black, I'm actually telling this one to only be 10% of it. So I'm making it more transparent. You can see through it. So that is what the alpha does over here. And then going down over here, you can see that we have the H1, H2, which are the sizes. This is the H1, this is the H2. And then I'm making specifics about H1, H2, the same, where we talk about clamp. We will come back to clamp during this lecture or lesson. And then we have this main thing to get this layout, so you can see all of these lines. And then we have a container and all of this. It doesn't really matter. Most of the things you can see here in the base is basically here just not to so you'll understand it. It would be great if you could understand this because it's many things introduced there are of very high value, and I do not require you to understand all of it. But I want you to understand that what this one does, that it sets things up so you can see it. You can see the things you need to see clearly. That is what it does. Because what we'll do in the rest of this one is that we go over here and we're going to write things in Flexbox and CSS Grid and layer example. And we'll do so by writing Flexbox and CSS Grid at the same time. We're going to make something in here and then make something here and then continue on down. And while we're done doing that, I think we have all would have experienced it's very clear what happens. Not always why it happens, it takes more time, but what happened, it's important that we can see this. And having done so, we can go down and take the example, which is at the very bottom. And I'm going to make that visible right now by just switching this one over and making this one none. And we'll see what's going to happen down there. That's a beautiful, no, it's a horrible website, but it's what we're going to do. We're going to look at this website, which is just a dummy thing within this. It's not really a proper website. It's inside a container, but some things happens in here that are great, are absolutely great. So the way things react towards design changes and such happens for reasons that I want you to learn throughout this lesson. So even though the design isn't great, it's not meant to be great in this one. It's meant to show you a combination of things that happens over here in CSS Grid, Flexbox, together with other much many others variable and valuables techniques. So we have subgrids, we have grid area, we have container queries, media queries, and so on and so forth. And this is the first walkthrough. It could have been it's kind of lengthy, but it's also important that you feel that you understand what's going to happen. And in the next video, we'll go ahead and start by unpacking these Flexbox and CSS Grid things and see what it'll do and while they do so.